In Brazil, Brasilia and Buenos Aires strengthened their bilateral cooperation ties following President Alberto Fernandez's official visit. In Palestine, the Israeli occupation forces shelled the northern Gaza Strip, leaving at least 5 people injured. And in Sudan, the Foreign Ministry announced a 7-day truce between the National Army and the Rapid Support Forces, raising hopes of an end to weeks of bloodshed. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Tuesday afternoon, President Alberto Fernandez and his delegation entered the Brazilian presidential residence to meet with President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva to discuss the evolution of the bilateral agreements signed earlier this year. Argentina's cabinet chief, Agustin Rossi, the ministers of economy, Sergio Massa, and of foreign affairs, international trade and worship, Santiago Cafiero, Argentina's ambassador to Brazil, Daniel Scioli, the secretary general of the presidency, Julio Vitovelo, and the presidency spokesperson, Gabriela Cerruti, are participating in the meeting on behalf of Argentina. Later, the Argentinian president and the first lady, Fabiola Ñañez, participated in a dinner hosted by the Brazilian president at the official residence. The Brazilian government announced the reinforcement of police operation to expel minors resistant to leave Yanomami indigenous land in the Amazon following clashes on weekend that left 1 indigenous man and at least 4 minors dead. The authorities claim to have dismantled more than 300 illegal mining sites and maintain that between 75% and 80% of the miners have already left the reserve located on the Venezuelan border, but some of them are resistant in a violent manner. The Minister of Indigenous Peoples, Sonia Guajajara, traveled with a federal government delegation to the state of Roraima to address the situation. Guajajara assured that the integrated action will be reinforced and will continue until all conflicts cease and all minors are withdrawn. The government of Luis Inácio Lula da Silva launched a vast operation in February to expel thousands of minors who have been illegally occupying the Yanomami Indigenous Reserve for years, where gold prospectors are accused of unleashing a humanitarian crisis.
The Brazilian state will not back down in the face of criminality. The actions, as the Minister of Justice has already said, will be intensified. We will reinforce the IBAMA, PRF, and federal police teams with the armed forces, which is fundamental for logistical support and all the operational aspects, so that we can provide a suitable response. The state cannot insist, supporting, encouraging, presence, the permanence of minors in Yanomami territory, because the state cannot have as its main economic activity an illicit activity.
Paraguay's president-elect Santiago Peña confirmed on Tuesday his intentions to resume official relations with Venezuela and its president Nicolás Maduro. The new president, who will take office on August 15th, admitted that his position on the matter is the opposite of that of the current Paraguayan president Mario Abdo Benítez. In response to a query from the press media of neighboring countries, Peña explained that the peoples of Latin America must be united in an economic, political, and social sense. Relations with Maduro must be separated from human rights, the president-elect stated, and highlighted that many Venezuelans traveled today to Paraguay despite the fact that Asunción broke diplomatic relations with Caracas in January 2019 after disowning the mandate of the Bolivarian leader. Peña alluded earlier to the issue on April 27th, 3 days before the elections, when he assured that he would love to re-establish diplomatic relations with Venezuela. In Paraguay, President-elect Santiago Peña announced on Tuesday that his campaign manager, José Alberto Alderete, and former Finance Minister Lea Jiménez will be part of his transition team.
Therefore, I would like to announce the 2 people who will be the channel of communication with the government in the next 3.5 months until August 15th. They are people who are knowledgeable in public administration, people we have been working with for many years.
Cuba hosts the 3rd cycle of peace dialogues between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army. These negotiations stalled for 4 years, resumed on November 2022 in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, and were subsequently held in Mexico. According to the General Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the island, Eugenio Martinez, there are guarantees for the development of these talks in Havana. On April 25th, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez announced the date on which the Caribbean nation hosted this meeting and affirmed that his country would act with the traditional disposition and impartiality that characterizes it as a guarantor and alternative venue. Also on Tuesday, Cuba hosts over 1,000 foreign delegates and attendees for the International Meeting of Solidarity with the Caribbean Nation and Anti-Imperialism. Foreign visitors will be joined by around 200 national delegates at the Convention Palace of the capital to raise their voices against the U.S. economic, commercial, and financial blockade and in favor of the removal of the Caribbean country from Washington's unilateral list of nations that allegedly sponsor terrorism. During the last few days, those who traveled to the island attended the 13th International Scientific Workshop, May Day, which had among its main axes the contemporary debate on historiography, theory, and method for the study of labor and workers, as well as the social movements in the Americas. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The United States will deploy 1,500 additional troops to the border with Mexico, the Pentagon said on Tuesday, ahead of an expected surge of migrants when COVID-era restrictions are lifted next week. Title 42 program, introduced by President Donald Trump as a measure to curb the pandemic and expel people crossing without immigration documents, will end on May 11th. Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder reported in a statement that for 90 days, those 1,500 military personnel will fill critical capability gaps, such as ground-based detection and surveillance, data entry, and warehouse support. The deployment will be in addition to the 2,500 troops already assisting the U.S. Border Patrol and other agencies prepared to deal with the long-anticipated increase in the number of border crossers.
At the request of the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Austin approved a temporary Department of Defense increase of an additional 1,500 military personnel to supplement U.S. Customs and Border Protection efforts on the U.S. southwest border. For 90 days, these 1,500 military personnel who will be sourced from the active duty component will fill critical capability gaps such as ground-based detection and monitoring, data entry, and warehouse support until CPB can address these needs through contracted support.
Hollywood television and film screenwriters launched an industry-wide strike on Tuesday for the first time in 15 years. The strike could have potentially widespread ramifications in a fight for fair wages in the streaming era. The Screenwriters Guild of America said its 11,500 members will begin the walkout on Tuesday. Negotiations between studios and screenwriters, which began in March, failed to reach a new contract before the writers' current deal expired shortly after midnight Tuesday. The labor dispute could have a domino effect on film and television productions depending on how long the strike lasts, but a shutdown has been widely predicted for months because of the scope of the discord. Last month, screenwriters voted overwhelmingly to authorize the strike, with 98% of their members supporting it. The issue in dispute is how screenwriters are compensated in an industry where streaming has changed the rules of Hollywood's economy. On Tuesday, FIFA President Gianni Infantino threatened not to broadcast the Women's World Cup in major European countries if the offers from its broadcasters continue to fall far below expectations. For months now, the world's football boss has been fighting against unacceptable proposals from the main European broadcasters for its most important women's tournament, 20 to 100 times lower than those received for the Men's World Cup. Negotiations have been particularly difficult in Europe and have failed to reach agreements with the big five countries of football when FIFA has already signed with US, Canadian or Brazilian broadcasters. It should be noted that the FIFA Women's World Cup has been played 8 times in history since its first edition in 1991. The United States has won it 4 times, Germany twice, Japan and Norway once. The Women's World Cup will be held from July 20th to August 20th this year.
To generate these revenues, and they should help us, because otherwise we'll simply not sell these rights at these undervalued prices to them. And well, the European public will not be able to watch the Women's World Cup, which after the success of the last tournament in France, after the success of the Euro, would be really, really a pity. When you look at the viewing figures of the Women's World Cup, you compare it with the Men's World Cup, it is not 100 times less. It is maybe, the Women's World Cup is maybe 50 to 60% of the Men's World Cup. In Germany, the most watched football game last year was the Women's Euro final, not the Men's World Cup matches of Germany.
On Tuesday, Greece's Supreme Court has agreed to ban the far-right Greek party from participating in the country's upcoming general election scheduled to take place on May 21st. The court's assembly, ruled by a majority of 9-1, decided to uphold amendments passed by Parliament in February, which disqualified parties led by politicians convicted of serious offences. The ban, widely supported by Greece's main political parties, was upheld despite a last-minute change in the Greek party leadership. The decision could affect the outcome of the elections, as the winning party is likely to find it easier to form a new government with fewer parties represented in the national legislature. The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, arrived on Tuesday in Madrid on his first state visit to Spain with the aim of strengthening bilateral economic and commercial relations, but also to discuss the process promoted in the Latin American country to achieve what the Colombian president calls total peace. Sources of the Spanish government advanced its support to this project and to the social measures undertaken by the Colombian president. Spain accompanies the peace process in Colombia, a condition reaffirmed by the president of the Spanish government, Pedro Sánchez. Petro arrived accompanied by his wife Verónica Alcocer and the Colombian Foreign, Mines, Education and Trade ministers from a cabinet that was reshuffled on Monday. It will not be until Wednesday when Petro will officially start his state visit. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the south. At least 5 people were injured after an Israeli missile strike hit an area east of the town of Beit Hanun in the northern Gaza Strip. At the same time, Tel Aviv Army fired several artillery shells at 2 sites east of Gaza City and east of Khan Yunis. On the other hand, occupation forces carried out tank shelling on a site east of Khan Yunis City, causing multiple structural damage. The Israeli attacks followed the death of Palestinian prisoner Kader Adnan in an Israeli prison after 87 days of hunger strike in protest of his administrative detention without charge. In Sudan, the National Army and the Rapid Support Forces Parliamentary Group agreed on Tuesday to a 7-day truce starting May 4th. The African nation's foreign ministry made the announcement in a phone conversation with South Sudan's President Salva Kiir. The move raises hopes of an end to weeks of bloodshed. The truce was reached by Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his deputy-turned-rival Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, who commands the RSF. Hundreds of people have been killed and thousands wounded in the fighting as airstrikes and artillery exchanges have pounded swaths of Greater Khartoum, sparking the exodus of thousands of Sudanese to neighboring countries. The statement from Juba also said the 2 sides agreed to name their representatives to peace talks to be held at any venue of their choice. We continue in Sudan. Doctors, workers in hospitals denounce the critical situation they are in, with a high number of injured and the total lack of resources to care for them. Sudanese doctor Hawid Al Hassan from the Alban Jaded Hospital in the East Nile neighborhood of Khartoum addresses the issue.
The number of casualties varies. On days when there are battles in the area, we receive between 30 to 40 injured people. Numbers vary. We also receive other cases of people who suffer from diabetes or high blood pressure, and patients who need dialysis, plus children and pregnant women. We are doing surgical procedures through cesarean delivery because the cost of operations in private hospitals is too high and people cannot afford it amid these circumstances. So we decided to help women by doing cesarean section operations. The staff is very exhausted. We are understaffed. Other medical staff cannot reach us because the roads are no longer safe. We are understaffed and lack equipment.
World Food Program Executive Director Cindy McCain is on a work visit to Somalia, where she already met with Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. McCain's visit is intended to discuss a range of issues such as the development of Somalia's food programs, the support provided by WFP, the development of food programs, and addressing the challenges posed by climate change to food security. It should be emphasized that in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, one starvation death occurs on average every 36 seconds, according to UN statements. In 2023, the number of malnourished pregnant or breastfeeding women in Africa is projected to rise to 154,000 from 64,000 in 2022, also quoted the UN report. The head of the World Food Program, Cindy McCain, warned during her visit to Somalia that there is still a risk of famine for the Somali population and stressed that people will die from it, especially children.
Yes, there is a risk of famine in Somalia. Last year we were able to keep it at bay because of the efforts of WFP and our partner NGOs and certainly the Somali NGOs that were in here as well. But this year we're not sure we're going to have the same kind of money that we had last year, so that will mean there'll be less rations to less people. That's an important issue here, because unless we can continue to feed the population that we need to feed, people are going to die as a result of this, and especially children.
On Tuesday, Kenyan police tear gassed a delegation of opposition politicians who wanted to visit the president's office in the capital Nairobi in a day of anti-government protests. Elected officials from the opposition and Senior Coalition wanted to petition about the unacceptable high cost of fuel, food, and electricity. After being denied access to the presidential building, they were dispersed with tear gas. After a one-month break, the historic opponent Raila Odinga called for a resumption on Tuesday of the demonstrations against President William Ruto, whom he accuses of stealing the August 2022 presidential election and of being unable to curb the current price hike. A previous series of protests in late March led to clashes, looting, and vandalism. 3 people, including a policeman, were killed during these rallies banned by the authorities. The 11th session of the Syrian-Iraqi Joint Committee meetings concluded in Damascus on Tuesday. The meetings, which are part of Syria and Iraq's efforts to restore the outstanding level of the bilateral cooperation before the outbreak of the 2011 terrorist war, were held in Damascus on Tuesday. Hisham Wanus with the details from Damascus.
Over the course of 2 days, a broad representation of the different public and private sectors of both countries discussed ways to develop bilateral cooperation in the areas of education, health, culture, energy, electricity, customs, oil, water resources, communication, and social affairs, among others.
We aim to boost our trade to the highest possible level in order to maximize mutual profit, and our ambition as the Iraqi side is to attract the Syrian human industrial potential and the Syrian experience in this field to the markets and industrial production fields of Iraq.
We try to remove the obstacles that impede the flow of Syrian goods to Iraq and vice versa, driven by the mutual interest to increase our trade exchange, especially since our brother Iraq has been Syria's main trade partner for many years, and the bilateral commercial indicators show this fact.
The meetings also addressed mechanisms to increase the level of trade, exchange experiences in setting up industrial facilities, encourage the Syrian-Iraqi business sector to establish joint investments and companies, and take advantage of the industrial and agricultural investment opportunities available in both countries.
Through these meetings, we seek to finalize agreements and memoranda of understandings in the areas of trade, investments, industry, agriculture, health, education, and other vital sectors, and to prepare the documents and contracts to be signed by both parties at the end of these meetings and in the coming months.
We want a real partnership through the setup of joint industrial plants, with equal responsibilities between Iraq and Syria, as well as to benefit from the Syrian know-how, taking into account that Syria, in relation to industrial production, are for the Arab world what the Chinese are for the whole world, and can make the best products at the lowest cost.
The talks resulted in agreements and memoranda of understanding in education, health and trade, as well as in other fields of vital importance for the economic development of both neighboring countries. A consolidation of relations that demonstrates Washington's failure to separate Syria and Iraq and to isolate Damascus from its regional Arab environment.
teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.